Enda Kenny has been repeatedly underestimated by the media, by the general public, by political anorex, etc. He has done an amazing job in where he has brought Gael from in 2002. And after that statement there is inevitably a large but. And the but is, I think he still has a problem convincing, and I just noticed that last night again. His speech struck me, whereas some of the content was very worthy, the delivery struck me as being so PR'd within an inch of his life that it became transparent. And when it becomes transparent, I believe Ellen would know better, but I presume that's a failure of the PR.
When you can see the PR behind the speech,
I mean, and his hand actions in particularly, I just, oh God, I just wanted to turn away. At one stage he looked like he was doing the breaststroke when he was saying what was out for the future.
Ah, God, the poor man.
Look, having said all that, it looks like he'll be the next Taoiseach, and as has also been said before, prior to both Bertie Ahern and John Bruton becoming Taoiseach, people were also disparaging of their style and suggested that they never would make a job of it. In retrospect, we can debate what John Bertie Ahern did make of it, but at the time he certainly wasn't lacking in the know-how of how to conduct himself.
Yes. He went from anoraks to
the office
Louis
gives
Copeland.
gravitas.
Ellen Gunning, as you are Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations, Mick's point is a very good one, that you could see the PR. It's the perennial problem with Enda Kenny, isn't it? His inability to convey sort of charisma and credibility, even though what he might be saying could be really dynamic.
Well, unlike Mick, I wasn't flicking. I have no interest in sport, so I did 30 minutes solid of Enda Kenny last night. I'd have to agree. I felt he was rehearsed to within an inch of his life. But I think the man's problem is he can't deliver. I mean, even the crowds, he was talking to a Fine Gael audience. They should have all been putty in his paws. And there was no feeling that people were really with him. There was no feeling of enthusiasm. There was a few times he seemed to stop expecting the applause and then realised it wasn't going to happen. There wasn't that feeling, even when he came in. I don't know what piece of music they were playing. It seemed strangely modern for Enda Kenny. It just didn't fit. And as he walked up the hall, he just didn't seem to catch that feeling of people wanting to slap him on the back and say, here is the next Taoiseach. He has a problem. He has a huge problem with delivery, but I don't think Brian Cowan particularly delivers extremely well either. In terms of what he actually covered, I thought he was quite interesting, because he was talking about the abolition of the Seanad, but he was talking about it in historical terms, which was interesting, and saying that since Fine Gael were the people who actually introduced the Seanad, then maybe it fell to Fine Gael. It was.
Do you think there was a backtracking then of his ambitions to abolish the Seanad?
No, he's saying that they are the party who should, if they introduced it, they should abolish it. That the mantle falls to them. No, he was sticking to that quite strongly, despite the fact that some of his own party are not in agreement.
And the young Fine Gaelers aren't for it. Obviously,
well,
they're not for a lot of reasons.
If you think about the four things he came out with the abolition of the Seanad. He said that he wants to reduce the Dáil by 20 TDs, which won't be terribly popular either. He was very upbeat about jobs and healthcare, which I might come back to in a minute, and he spoke about introducing more women into the party. All of which he had originally said he wanted to do, none of which really has tremendous backing within his own party. If you look at the introduction of women, this is a man who brought the 50% quota idea to his own front bench, to his own parliamentary party, and I believe it was Lucinda Creighton who led the charge against actually introducing a quota for women. He's obviously keen to introduce more women into the party. I think it was a mistake. I think he should have stood his ground. 20 years ago, probably when I was a bit closer to Lucinda Creighton's age, I would have said, you don't need a quota system. 20 years on, I think, bring in the quota. There are loads of idiot men who shouldn't be in council or TD
and
or
fair dues to him for doing that,
positions.
because I think when we look at equality issues over and over again, the clear message seems to be you won't really have greater equality between men and women in terms of pay or positions or everything else that matters in society in terms of equality until you have equality within a parliamentary system, maybe where at least 30 to 40% of the representatives are women. That has a huge influence in terms of the legislation. You can see it in the Scandinavian countries where it clearly works. And, some people say positive discrimination isn't a good thing, but maybe for a few years that's what we need to do.
Well, the point I really wanted to make about the idiot men was that the argument that women have always used against putting 50% women in is that men or somebody will choose idiot women to fill the 50% positions. And I reckon there are idiot men there. There will be idiot women who get into the 50%. It doesn't really matter. If you end end up with half men and half women, which roughly equates to what the population of the country is like, then the men will fight to remove the idiot men and get decent men in there, and the women will fight to remove the idiot women. And I actually think the quota system would be good because it would change legislation and it would change the way issues are debated, and I think it would change an awful lot of the practices in the Dáil.
Okay, Ken Murphy? I mean, just maybe back to Enda Kenny. The points might be very good. You have a problem with PR. We've talked about that.
Well, I watched Francis versus England last night, and I have to. But I was reflecting on this. I can't remember, and I'm reasonably interested in politics, as you know, Karen. I can't remember the last time I watched any leader's address from any political leader on TV. I mean, who watches these programmes? I certainly don't, and nobody that I talk to, I believe, watches them very much either. I think maybe going back to the 70s, the 80s, when there was really exciting stuff where it was Liam Cosgrave type, Mongrel Fox's speeches or Charlie Haughey's speeches at Ardèche and that kind of thing. But it all seems so bland and so PR'd now and so predictable that you wonder. And
but it is a huge influence for voters. I mean,
I wonder, is it though? How many people actually have their minds changed by watching a leader's address? In this stilted, with all of this, with the choreographed audience. Sometimes you can see a lot more just looking at the audience and see, are people looking at their watches, or they're yawning, or and the stage managed applause and speeches. And I'm not talking about Fine Gael at all. I'm talking about all of them. I think they have no effect, and I wonder. In fact, I suppose it's public service broadcasting has to do this to genuflect to democracy, and it's probably a good thing, but I wonder what the numbers are that actually watch them.